In the first round, we will travel through water management systems of Sringaverpur and Kalani Dam, one of the oldest dams in the world, the water harvesting structures of Rajasthan's forts, and end up with innovative air cooling systems the Mughals used in their architecture. The only universal need of every culture across the world, irrespective of geography or time, has been water. In India, the history of water management goes back a long way, even before we had begun settling down as organized societies. There is evidence of wells in the Indus-Saraswati Valley from the 3rd millennium BC. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-daro was probably a water storage tank. The Harappan cities had excellent systems of water harvesting and drainage. In an earlier episode, we explored Dholavira, which was laden with examples of sophisticated water engineering. All this shows that ancient India had a deep understanding of hydrology. Hydrology is the study of waters both on and below the surface of the earth. Hydrology also encompasses the occurrence, distribution, movement and properties of the waters of the earth and their relationship with the environment within each phase of the water cycle. A hydrologic cycle, there are many pathways the water may take. It may be captured for millions of years in polar ice caps. It may flow to rivers and finally to the sea. It may soak into the soil to be evaporated directly from the soil surface as it dries or be transpired by growing plants. It may percolate through the soil to the groundwater reservoirs, aquifers to be stored, or it may flow to wells or springs or back to streams by seepage. And this cycle's time varies from a short period to millions of years. Let us travel to the most holy of India's rivers, Ganga, to see how the waters of these rivers were tapped. Our journey takes us to a spot about 35 kilometers ahead of Allahabad. This part of the Ganga has mythical connections with the story of Lord Ram. What we are about to explore is a stunning example of ancient hydraulic engineering that dates back to the 1st century BCE. The site was excavated on a large scale by the Archaeological Survey of India between 1977 and 1985. And these excavations uncovered a series of large rectangular brick tanks which were used to supply river water to the city in the most innovative fashion. The most impressive feature of this reservoir is the size. It was engineered to manage the drinking water needs of an entire city. Quite something. Let's explore how these tanks may have worked. This system tapped into the water of the Ganga during the monsoon, when the level of the water usually rose by about 7 to 8 meters. So this water would spill into an adjoining stream or nala. From this stream was a specially built canal, 11 meters long and 5 meters deep. This stream carried the water into the Sringaverpur tanks. There were 3 tanks. The water from the river entered the first tank, which worked as a silting chamber. Here the silt, dirt and debris would settle. The relatively cleaner water then overflowed to enter the main rectangular tank, which was made of bricks. The water was stored here. A stepped outlet from this tank allowed only clean water to trickle through to the next tank, also rectangular in shape. This tank apparently constituted the primary source of water supply for Sringaverpur. There was also a circular tank at one end of the complex. This possessed an elaborate staircase allowing access to the lower levels of the water. The excavators of the site suggest that some shrines stood along the edge of this circular tank and that the waters of this tank were used for ritual bathing and prayers. Let's explore the understanding of water that powered this a little more. The currents of the flood water should have been enough to carry the sediment along with it. How was this prevented? Well, devices called dissipation structure within the tanks systematically and progressively lowered the water velocity as it flowed. The actual construction and dimensions of the tank helped with this. The tanks have a narrow base and a wider top. They're also more constricted where the water enters and broader towards the exit. Each section also had a small outward inclination. As a result, as the water flowed through the system, the level rose. It slowed down, thus giving enough time for the sediments to settle. An elaborate wasteware provided at the end of this tank carried water out of the tank back into the river. The excess water was returned to the river through this final exit channel. A series of wells in the bed of the tank allowed access groundwater even during the hot summer months. This site shows us the hydraulic engineering expertise that existed in India 2000 years ago. An idea that is still so workable even today that it is actually being used in the Clean Ganga program. The science of creating reservoirs and dams evolved to help confine and utilize the flow of water for human purposes such as irrigation. Since agriculture is critical to India, access to water has always been a big challenge. About 80% of the total annual rainfall of India occurs in 4 months, from mid-June to mid-October. So it is essential to provide irrigation for production of crops to balance the 8 months. So let's travel to see where the first dam in India was built. This takes us to one of the great rivers of the south, the magnificent Kaveri. Across the waters here lies one of the oldest irrigation dams in the world, built around 2,000 years ago. This dam was built by King Karikala Chol of the Chol dynasty in the 2nd century AD. And the technology was so modern that it is still in use, making it one of the oldest irrigation systems in the world. The Kaveri River splits into 2 channels near the island of Sri Rangam. The southern channel continues down as the Kaveri, while the northern channel is called Kolladam or Koldroon River. Further downstream, these 2 channels come close again. It is at this point that Karikala Chol decided to build the Kalanai. Why did he do this? Karikalan built the Kalanai for mainly 2 reasons: flood control and irrigation. Having Having witnessed the river causing great floods during the rainy season and also forcing droughts during the dry months, he and his advisors devised this grand project to maintain a steady flow of water throughout the year. But did the Chols have the technical know-how to put together a structure like this? We know that besides being fierce warriors and conquerors, they had an immense understanding of the arts and crafts. The enormous temples they built, like the Brihadeshwar temple at Tanjavur or the Airavateswar temple at Darasuram, stands testimony to their engineering, artistic and architectural brilliance. The first known dam was built in 2900 BC across the Nile River to protect the city of Memphis from flooding. Dam building was continued into the time of the Roman Empire. Dams are also seen in nature. Beavers build dams to keep the water deep enough to cover the openings to their homes, protecting them from predators. Back to the dam we are studying, the Kalanai Dam, which is a simple check dam. This particular dam is built of uncut stone. It is 329 meters long, 20 meters wide, and 5.4 meters high. At the time of the British, some alterations were made on the original structure. They laid the grid separators and a bridge on top of the old dam. In case of a check dam, the most important decision to be taken is its location. This decision is crucial as the effectiveness of the dam depends on this. The advantages of check dams are that they store surface water for use both during and after the monsoon. They help in groundwater recharge of the area. Recharge of water helps in raising the water table in the area. Check dams can be of various sizes and built with a variety of materials, including stone, clay, and cement. This dam is a big reason why Tanjavur is called the rice bowl of South India. It is believed that the Kalanai initially irrigated about 69,000 acres, though it now irrigates close to 1 million acres. The dam also diverts excess flood water. Once the floods were diverted to Koledam, they flowed directly to the sea, causing minimal damage to agriculture. Next up, we are moving to a fort in Rajasthan, Chittorgarh. But the idea here is to study this stunning fort through a specific lens as to how hydrological science was used to plan many structures like this in medieval India, and how technical know-how was used to manage water as a resource. A lot can be learned about the science of water harvesting and management in medieval forts. First up, let's look at the role of hydrology in the selection of these fort cities. These forts could support human habitations only because they had elaborate water harvesting systems. Invading armies would sometimes lay siege to these forts for months. During such times, there had to be enough water inside the fort to sustain its defenders and inhabitants for long periods. Let's explore how Chittorgarh works. The fort nestles in the Aravalli Hills at the eastern border of the Thar Desert. It is perched on the top of a huge oval hill about 152 meters high. The fort supported an entire city. Estimates indicate that at least 50,000 people lived in the fort at a single time. Along with a large number of elephants and horses. In a year of more than normal rainfall, average annual rainfall 700 millimeters, enough water would be stored to last the next 12 months. Even after water loss due to seepage and evaporation and other causes, an army of 50,000 could live in the fort for 4 years without fear of thirst. The fort has 84 water bodies, out of which only about 22 exist today. These include talabs, ponds, kunds, wells, and Bowries, step wells. Let us study how all this water was tapped. It was basically through underwater springs and rainwater harvesting. Groundwater is stored in and moves slowly through the geologic formations of soil, sand, and rocks called aquifers. A spring is the result of an aquifer being filled to the point that the water overflows onto the land surface. And the harvesting of rainwater simply involves the collection of water from surfaces on which rain falls and subsequently storing this water for later use. In the fort at Chittorgarh, all talabs in the fort have natural catchments. The builders of Chittor not only harvested surface water, but also the ground seepage. The kunds and bawalis are located below the talabs, so that even the seepage from the latter is not lost. The fort spreads over 500 hectares, 40% of which are given over to water bodies. The average reservoir depth is about 2 meters. Taken together, this means these reservoirs can store about 4 billion liters of water. Let us travel to one of the great Mughal structures, the Red Fort in New Delhi, to explore some of the devices the Mughals put in place to cool their stunning forts. The Red Fort was built when in 1638, Shah Jahan transferred his capital from Agra to Delhi. This massive walled citadel with red sandstone walls took nearly a decade to complete. When Shah Jahan built the Red Fort, it was on the west bank of the river. The Red Fort is shaped like an irregular octagon with 2 long sides on the east and west, and with 2 main gates, one on the west and the other on the south, called Lahori and Delhi gates respectively. The one thing that the Mughals struggled with was the Indian heat, especially in the capital city of Delhi. So many of the great Mughal forts and palaces were equipped with innovative cooling mechanisms. Simple devices like latticed screens or jalis filtered the sunlight. The jali helps in lowering the temperature by compressing the air through the holes. And when the air passes through these openings, its velocity increases, giving profound diffusion. The Diwani house has 2 sets of columns about 4 meters apart. Each set of columns could be fitted with curtains and screens according to the need at any time. In summer, there were 3 sets of screens used, 2 of them of grass mats kept wet by sprinkling of water. Heavy quilted curtains were suspended in place of these screens in winter. In the daytime, these curtains were raised up to allow the sun to warm up the building interior, and they were lowered in the evening to retain the warmth. Other more permanent features were woven into the fort. Many of the wall of the living areas, like the Sheesh Mahal, were extra thick, which ensured that they remained cooler. This is because heat flows through solids at rates measured by their conductivity. The rate of heat flow is also proportional to the thickness of the material. Mughals came up with other interesting innovations to cool their spaces. For example, many of the interior walls of the fort were actually made up of two walls with a hollow space in between. This hollow space allowed the building to be cooled by the water that would flow between the walls. Along with this, there were vents that were carved into the walls that cooled the air further. Many of the fort's structures formed a part of the hydraulic system, like the Shah Burj. This controlled much of the water entering the fort. A system using hydraulic pressure was in place to draw up water from the river. Attached to the Shah Burj was a white marble pavilion, Burj-i-Shamli. A sloping marble chute sculpted in such a way as to make the water spurt as it ran down into a marble scalloped basin, from where it then spontaneously distributed into successively connected canals, which constituted the Nehri Bisht, stream of paradise. The Nehri Bisht then made its way through the grounds of the fort and eventually led out of the fort into the city of Shahjahanabad. Away inside the fort is also a magnificent baoli or step well, believed to be older than the fort and surprisingly in good condition. This baoli is a unique structure. It has stairs from two sides, unlike the usual single staircases leading down to the bottom water tank. The two sets of stairs at 90 degrees mirror each other, giving the baoli an L shape. At the deep end, where the stairs meet, is an octagonal tank measuring 6.50 meters in diameter and 14.27 meters deep. The history and development of water structures provide a fascinating testimony to the science and culture of the time. There is so much more to explore about water.